Whether you're an Atalanta fan, Chris Wilder in disguise, or you just love tactical innovations, then the chances are you're pretty excited about the new wide centre-back role on FM22. But like any new function comes new dilemmas. How do you use the role, the best tactics, formations, players for the wide centre-back role? Well, on Squawker today, we will provide you a definitive guide on the wide centre-back role and use real-life data to paint a clearer picture of its use in the modern game. The origin of the wide centre-back is not entirely traceable to a moment in football's storied timeline. Like many of the game's innovations, changes occur gradually, developing over time rather than radically overnight. For the Premier League, Chris Wilder arguably blazed a trail in 2019-20 when his Sheffield United side stunned the division and finished 9th whilst using wide centre-backs. But it can be argued that managers before him were experimenting with variations of the function. Antonio Conte's Chelsea, for example. Pep Guardiola even tried a system a few times during the early stages of his Manchester City tenure, a certain 5-0 win over Liverpool in September 2017 being a key example. With the role so influential in Italy during Conte's Juventus reign, there are, of course, other advocates. Gian Piero Gasperini's Atalanta being the most prominent example. Julian Nagelsmann's RB Leipzig also used centre-backs. Marseille has switched to a back three under Georges Sampaoli, and even Brentford have caught the eye this season. But now you know the key examples in the game of football, we're going to jump into Football Manager 22 and delve into the specifics on the new wide centre-back role. Football Manager says the main job of a wide centre-back is to stop the opposing attackers from playing and to clear the ball from danger when required. However, unlike standard central defenders, the wide centre-back is encouraged to stay wide in possession and support the midfield more like a fullback. Football Manager also gives you the option to play the wide centre-back in 3 different ways: defend, support or attack. With the defend duty, a wide centre-back is more likely to play like a traditional centre-back in a back 5. They will provide support in the wide areas at times, but mainly from deep. They're less likely to overlap or underlap and more likely to provide a diagonal backwards passing option. On a support duty, the wide centre-back is willing to make overlapping and underlapping runs, and that will create 2 versus 1 situations. And on the attack duty, the wide centre-back is willing to make regular overlapping and underlapping runs to create a 2v1 situation, and also has a higher tendency to dribble with the ball. Each of these duties also comes with preset player instructions. So if a player is on the defend duty, they will preset to cross from deep, hold their position and stay wider. If they're on the support duty, it will just simply be stay wider. Or if they're on the attack duty, they would be asked to cross more often, cross from the byline, dribble more and stay wider. Now if we zoom in on the Football Manager 22 clip that was just playing in the background there when I was talking about the roles and duty, this is a wide centre-back that I've got here playing on the attack duty, and you can see him running down the line, offering support for the other players and actually getting across into the area. Now you can see, if utilised correctly, how dangerous this role could be. Now Football Manager gives you attributes for each player on the game, and now we're going to be looking at the attributes which they recommend you should be looking for if you want a really good wide centre-back in your team. Now these do vary depending on what duty we go for, but we'll start off with the wide centre-back role on defend, and you can see the key attributes they recommend are crossing, heading, marking, tackling, positioning, jumping reach, stamina and strength. There's also a number of secondary attributes which include dribbling, aggression, anticipation, bravery, composure, concentration, decisions, work rate and pace. So on the support duty, things change slightly, with the key attributes as crossing, dribbling, heading, marking, tackling, positioning, jumping reach, pace, stamina and strength, and the second attributes being mainly mental attributes as seen on the screen here. And finally, for the attack duty, not much changes other than Football Manager recommending that off the ball is a key attribute and positioning changes to a secondary attribute. As I quickly mentioned earlier, you can only use the wide centre-back role if the player is literally the wide centre-back. They would have to play in a back 3 or a back 5 system, and the wide centre-back can be used on the left or right hand side of a back 3. You don't necessarily have to have both your left centre-back and right centre-back as wide centre-backs. It's completely up to you, but some clubs in the real life examples we'll look at in the middle probably played a little bit more like that. So for example, Atalanta, there probably isn't a greater user of a wide centre-back system at the minute than the Italian club. They've transformed from a mid-table side in Serie A to regulars of the Champions League table under Gasperini. His fluid, ultra-offensive 3-4-3 system has taken the continent by storm, and it all starts at the back. Let's take a look at last season as an example. He largely set up in a 3-4-2-1 with a back three of Christian Romero, Berat Jimcity and Rafael Toloi, forming the basis of this system. Jimcity and Toloi flanked the more robust Romero, and they were tasked with making vertical runs when in possession. From their average positions map last season, you can see the two centre-backs touching the halfway line, essentially functioning as central midfielders when Atalanta had the ball. Toloi in particular resembled a fullback at times, underlapping and perhaps more prominently overlapping right wing-back Hans Hateboer. His Serie A heat map from 2020-21 has the appearance of an attacking number 2 and certainly not that of a traditional centre-back. If we compare that to Leonardo Bonucci of Juventus, for example, sticking with the Italian theme, you can see how a centre-back's heat map should look. Toloi deviates from that script, and then some. If we want to compare another right-sided centre-back in a three-man defence, Patrick of Simone Inzaghi's Lazio shows a more static defender, tasked with holding his position in a fixed area of the pitch. Toloi, meanwhile, was given free rein to abandon his defensive position and surge up the pitch. His most frequented area was in the opposition half, as highlighted by the white marking. Remember, this is a centre-back. You can also see Lazio centre-backs playing much further back compared to Atalanta by their average positions map. We can also compare this to versions of a three-man defence seen in the Premier League recently, looking at Thomas Tuchel's Chelsea this season and Nuno Espirito Santo's Wolves from 2019-2020. You can just see how close to the goalkeeper their centre-backs are, in contrast to Atalanta. Gasperini wants his players to express themselves with a full throttle approach, overwhelming opponents with a high press, high intensity brand. Nuno and Tuchel often prefer a more pragmatic approach, never compromising defensive structure for the sake of an entertaining attacking style. Gasperini is the opposite. But before we move on, let's have a quick look at Rafael Toloi, somebody that I mentioned quite a lot just there, and having a look at him on Football Manager, and he fits the wide centre-back role pretty well. The one attribute that's possibly a little bit lower than we need to have the perfect wide centre-back is that crossing attribute, but everything else is really, really solid and really strong. Good on the ball for a centre-back with 11 at dribbling, heading, marking and tackling, which is really a good level. A lot of mental attributes are needed to be a wide centre-back. You know, you are covering a lot of time and a lot of the pitch really with his aggression, anticipation, bravery, composure. They're all at a really, really good level. And something that, you know, not a lot of people would take a look at are his player traits. For a centre-back, he's got the player trait of gets forward whenever possible, which is perfect, tries long-range passes, which is perfect, and brings the ball out of defence as well. All three of those fit the mould of a brilliant wide centre-back. So now let's move on to Sheffield United. Of course, it wouldn't be a wide centre-back video without covering Chris Wilder's Sheffield United. The Blades were not completely gung-ho like Atalanta during the iconic 2019-20 season. That would have been suicide for a newly promoted team, but the wide centre-back system was put to good use by Wilder, and it left plenty of experienced managers in the Premier League rattled. Chris Basham and Jack O'Connell were the two players tasked with surging up the turf under Wilder as wide centre-backs, with John Egan holding the fort further back. Despite playing with three central midfielders, the majority of Sheffield United's attacks occurred down the flanks, emphasised by Basham and O'Connell's heat maps here. Again, like Toloi and Jimcity for Atalanta, the Blades' own attacking number 5 spent the majority of their time hugging the touchline. It's no wonder then that Basham finished the 1920 Premier League season as the only centre-back to complete over 20 take-ons. O'Connell meanwhile created the most big chances of any centre-back this season, and this in a division containing Guardiola's City and Klopp's Liverpool. O'Connell also attempted the most final third passes of any centre-back ahead of Virgil van Dijk and completed the most crosses as one of only two centre-backs to complete crosses with a double-digit finish. He, alongside Basham, also attempted the most. And having a quick look at Jack O'Connell here on Football Manager, you could argue that he's even better suited than Rafael Toloi to this wide centre-back role in FM. Really strong attributes all throughout for a wide centre-back. The ones that we pinpointed earlier on with the crossing and dribbling, O'Connell is much better at crossing in Football Manager. But the big defensive ones, your heading, your marking, your tackling, he's really good at. Mentally, he's really strong, and the physical side of things as well. And the player traits. Play short, simple passes, which is fine, but brings the ball out of defence is such a key one, and for a centre-back to have that once again is key for for this wide centre-back role. But one final real-life example we can look at is Julian Nagelsmann's RB Leipzig from the Bundesliga last season. The now Bayern Munich coach, who worked previously under Thomas Tuchel at Augsburg, used a system almost identical to Chelsea's current wing-back approach. The 3-4-2-1 deployed by Nagelsmann catered for just one traditional centre-back in Dayot Upamecano, with Marcel Halstenberg a left-back by trade and Lucas Klostermann a right-back by trade, occupying the spaces beside him. The versatile Germans were required to progress up the turf and double up on the flanks with Angelino on the left and Nordi Mukiele on the right. Overloads were created to stretch the play and draw defenders out of position, allowing the likes of Dani Olmo and Emil Forsberg to tuck in and exploit the half space. By doing this, numerical advantages were created in the most vulnerable parts of the field and opposition defences were stretched. Once again, Lucas Klostermann's heat map shows that his predominant position was in the opposition half, underpinning just how high he pushed up the field despite being a centre-back on paper. It will come as no surprise, therefore, that Halstenberg created the second most chances of any Bundesliga centre-back last season, finishing just one below of David Alaba of Bayern Munich. The Leipzig man also finished with the second most completed passes in the final third, again only below Alaba, and this despite playing just 24 matches to the Austrians' 32, while he also completed the third most crosses. For what it's worth, Halstenberg finished ahead of Alaba with the highest completed passes in the final third per 90 minutes of any centre-back last season. And once again, looking at Halstenberg, it's again very, very similar to the other two players that we've pinpointed. Crossing, one of his strongest attributes, which is great. The only one that is a little bit lower for Marcel Halstenberg is the dribbling attribute, but everything else is as you would expect and as you would want. His player traits don't quite match up with the other two players that we've already looked at, but with those attributes he should do more than an adequate job if you were to use him as a wide centre-back in FM22. Now, before we finish off the video, I wanted to pinpoint a few different players. Of course, we've looked at the likes of Atalanta, Sheffield United and RB Leipzig, but there are plenty of players around world football and especially in Football Manager 2022 that could still suit the wide centre-back role if you were to sign them for your team. The first one being Joe Gomez, and I think there are 2 or 3 Liverpool players that could easily fill this role. I've picked out Joe Gomez. We'll talk about another one shortly as well. But bar his crossing, again, Joe Gomez, very similar to Rafael Toloi, who we spoke about earlier on, has got strong attributes. He's fantastic on the ball with his 14 dribbling, but a good header of the ball. All his defensive attributes are bang on there, really. And the big bonus with Joe Gomez is his physical side, because he's a very, very quick centre-back as well. Still, with him being fairly young at 24 years of age, you can bring him in, and there's every chance some of these attributes can improve. If you want to train him on his crossing slightly, he may get that slightly higher as well. But Joe Gomez is a fantastic example for us to start off with. Going back to the Bundesliga as well, Lucas Hernandez is another player, and sort of similar to Halstenberg, because he can play at left back, but he can play very comfortably at centre back as well. And again, just all across his profile has got some really, really strong attributes. Good on the ball, good crosser as well, really strong tackling attribute. His heading, marking, tackling is at a good level. His mental attributes are fantastic, and again, a very good player physically as well. He also has that player trait of bringing the ball out of defence alongside some other ones that could cause you trouble throughout the season, including diving into tackles and arguing with officials. But if you ignore those, he has all the attributes to be a fantastic wide centre-back. Now, we're going back to Liverpool now, and albeit not a traditional centre-half, Fabinho has some fantastic attributes to fit the bill of a wide centre-back as well. Again, similar to Joe Gomez, really, just strong attributes throughout, technically, mentally and physically. The player traits for him, likes to switch ball to wide areas, bring the ball out of defence, would just suit this role really, really well. But on the ball, he's very comfortable, good crosser, good dribbler. If you want him to do the job, he'll be able to do it for you with ease. Another shout from the Premier League is Aymeric Laporte, Manchester City's centre-back, and again, world-class option. You know, a lot of these players, I think, you know, are coming in and they are world-class players, so you'd expect them to be decent on the ball and so on. But the last few that I've mentioned, especially Laporte, he has got unbelievable and I would argue world-class levels in the defensive areas. He's so strong mentally and good physically, but once again, good crosser and good dribbler for that wide centre-back role. The player traits for him, once again, tries long-range passes, brings the ball out of defence. These would suit the wide centre-back role brilliantly. Now, my last few are some slightly younger options, players that are playing at top levels, in my opinion, of European football, but maybe you could get for slightly cheaper, or maybe that you can work with just to sort of mould them into the way you want your wide centre-backs to play. The first one is going to be Mohamed Simakan from RB Leipzig, a team that we've already mentioned in today's video. And although some of his attributes aren't at that elite level that you would expect from, that we've seen from the likes of Hernandez, Laporte, or Fabinho, he's still got some really strong attributes. And at the age of just 21 years of age, within a few years, you could see some of these attributes grow and become really, really strong. Already got the player trait of bringing the ball out of the defence, but crossing and dribbling are good. And these heading, marking, and tackling are all at good enough levels so that in 2 or 3 seasons' time, he could become a world-class centre-back. Now we're going to move across to Italy. We're going to be looking at Pierre Kalulu, maybe a name that not a lot of us have heard of right now, but quite similar to a few of the players that we've mentioned in today's video. Can play as a right back, but can play as a centre back as well. And as a centre back, he could be, again, a fantastic, a wide centre-back. He could fill that role really well. Quite similarly to Simakan, really. He's got his attributes at a good level. They're not world-class level, but they're a good level right now. And with 2 or 3 years of training, playing him in a wide centre-back role, you can mould him into a really, really strong player for this role. He's good on the ball. He hasn't got any player traits as of yet, but you can easily train those onto him. But again, a slightly cheaper option for you if you want to bring one into your team. And finally, another player. This one is Gonçalo Inácio, currently playing for Sporting over in Portugal, and a young player who has loads and loads of potential. At 19 years of age, folks, he has got all the makings of a fantastic centre-back in world football, but he can fill the role of a wide centre-back that we've been speaking about today quite well. Good on the ball with his crossing and dribbling, a great passer of the ball, but strong heading, marking, tackling. Mentally he's good, physically he's good. It's going to sound like I'm repeating myself, but similarly to the last two, give him a bit of time, train him, mould him into that player you want him to be, and he can grow into one fantastic wide centre-back. But guys, that is all for today's video here on Squawka. Hopefully you've learned a lot more about the wide centre-back role. If there's any examples that you think that we've missed out on this video, do let us know in the comments section. Hit that like button on the video as well. And until next time, we'll see you all very, very soon.